I deserve to be paid for this video because part 1's script alone took me 2 hours to make. So, Hi, how are you? Hope you're well. So today I thought it would be really fun to do another little plot summary and review video. I've only ever done one, and that was for the Bridge Kingdom duology. And you know, I'm really in my Freida McFadden era this month. I read Never Lie, dived straight into Housemaid, after that dived straight into its sequel. I'm about halfway with the sequel as I'm filming this, and then after that, if I have time, I'm going to read the Inmate. So I thought, why not, for the Housemaid series, instead of making a reading vlog, make a little plot summary video, because it's a very popular book. So if anyone is interested in knowing what it's about but not wanting to read it, here you go. So I went a little crazy with the script. Like I said, I spent about 2 hours writing the script for book 1 itself. It's pretty detailed, but not like a chapter by chapter summary. But for that reason, I'm going to be splitting up these videos into a part 1, and then the next video that comes out will be part 2, because I just didn't want this to be an hour-long video, and I have a feeling that this is probably going to be around 13 minutes post-editing, so we'll see. I hope you enjoy, and I'm just going to dive straight into the summary, so let's go. So we start in the prologue with someone telling us that they're being arrested and that there is a body upstairs. We assume it's Millie, the main character that we're introduced to in chapter 1. And the reason I say assume is because that's important, so keep that in mind. But then in chapter 1, we meet our main girl, Millie, properly, and she is interviewing for a live-in housekeeper position with Nina Winchester, her daughter Cecilia, and the super duper rich and successful husband Andrew Winchester. Just to be clear, Cecilia and Andrew aren't there, but that's who she'll be working for. That's the entire family. We then find out that she really needs this job, but she doesn't think she'll guess it. Why? Because she has a record. So we find out she's a convict on parole, but we don't find out what she did until basically the end of the book. But we do find out that she's currently living in her car. She got evicted from her apartment after not being able to rent because she got fired from her waitressing job at a bar. They did almost call the cops on her and she would have been sent right back to prison, but because she left quietly, they didn't. And we also only find out what happened there nearing the end. So we're kind of left in the dark about what's going on. We just know she's a convict and she spent a lot of time in prison. So after the interview, Millie goes back to her car and basically just lives there for a few days, and we're just living with her. And she gets a call from Nina offering her the job, and she's so relieved. And she assumes that Nina didn't do a background check on her and that that she just went off of a gut feeling that rich women do. So the next morning, she arrives at the house with her stuff, and there's this Italian guy, Enzo, who tells her in Italian that she's in danger. She kind of brushes it off and she just goes inside, and she sees that the house is an absolute pigsty. Nina then takes her up to the attic, tells her that's where she'll be living, and Millie takes an hour or two to unpack, and then she goes to clean the house. Nina does apologize for how small the space is, but tells her that they want to make the guest room into a possible baby room, and she gives her a brand new iPhone because Millie only had like a really old flip phone that she could afford. Millie spends about 7 hours cleaning the house because it's absolutely disgusting, and Nina's daughter Cecilia comes home and she basically acts like a complete brat to her. Cecilia tells Millie that she's hungry, so Millie makes her a little like peanut butter and crackers snack, and Cecilia freaks out, calls her mom, tells her mom that the maid's trying to kill her, and starts crying. Which, by the way, Cecilia's maybe like 9-ish years old. She's still a kid. Nina's obviously very upset about this, and she's like, well, I told you she has an allergy. And internally, in her internal monologue, Millie swears that Nina never ever mentioned this, but she apologizes anyway, and, you know, says it'll never happen again. Do you want me to throw out the peanut butter? And Nina's like, no. And it's important that Millie recalls Nina didn't tell her about the allergy. That comes back. So The day goes on and she basically just finishes cleaning and then makes them like a steak dinner. And she meets Andrew Winchester for the first time and thinks he is the most beautiful, handsome man that she's ever seen in her entire life, because of course he is. Andrew invites her to eat dinner with them, but Millie can tell Nina does not like that, so she declines and she goes up to her room. And then she accidentally falls asleep after mentioning that even though the cot is ridiculously uncomfortable, it is the most comfortable she's been since she got into prison. So the next morning, Millie goes downstairs to find the kitchen an absolute disaster. Nina is throwing stuff around. She's breaking dishes. She threw a carton of milk and it's shattered on the floor. And then Nina turns around and sees Millie and she starts screaming at her. And she's basically saying her PCA notes are missing. She left them on the counter. Where are they? She needs them. Like, her meeting's gonna be ruined if she doesn't have them. Millie is 90% certain that she didn't throw them away. She said there is the possibility because it was an absolute disaster the day before, but she is very certain she didn't see a piece of paper on the counter that looked important. But she apologizes anyway to her, and basically before things get too out of hand, Andrew comes down and he like calms Nina down and she like stomps upstairs. Then Andrew apologizes to Millie for her behavior and says she can be quite eccentric, which that is a running theme of descriptions for Nina. Basically, a few weeks go by, things don't get better with Nina. She gets mad at Millie for things that she never told her. She tells her the wrong locations of things, like she didn't give her the proper name of her kid's school. She tells her the wrong time, so the day that Millie went to pick up Cecilia, she wasn't supposed to. She gives her minimal time to do things that would take quite a lot of time. She talks badly about her in front of her, and then on top of it all, Cecilia seems to be following in her mother's footsteps. And then during all of this time, Nina has heard rumors about Nina being crazy and how she was locked up in, their words, a loony bin, and she found antipsychotic medicine in her cabinet. So at this point, us as the readers are just like, oh, so Nina needs a lot of mental help, and Nina is very unstable. And we're kind of just led to believe that Nina is the bad person in this entire book. But then one night, Millie can't sleep now that she's used to the cot. Her insomnia from prison is back. So it's like 1 a.m. She decides she couldn't afford a TV for her room yet, so she decides to just go downstairs and sit and watch Family Feud in the living room. Quietly, everyone's asleep. She lives there too. She didn't see what the issue with that would be. So Andrew wakes up for a glass of water and he comes down and he sees her, and then he ends up like sitting with her for a little bit and watches the show. And I don't remember how it came up, but the peanut butter incident came up, and then Andrew says Cecilia isn't allergic to peanut butter, and then Millie's like, but Nina said, and he's like, I think I would know what my daughter is allergic to. Keep that in mind. But soon after that, Nina comes down. She is pissed about them two watching Family Feud together at 2 a.m. And she tells Millie that it's completely unacceptable and to not come out of the attic at night, which, whatever. But then a little bit later, as I mentioned, they want to make the guest room into a baby room because Andrew wants another baby. So him and Nina are at a specialist's appointment because Nina can't get pregnant. Or she hasn't been getting pregnant when they were trying. But they come back, they're both in tears, they go up, and Millie can tell the appointment did not go well. And she asks Andrew what happened, and he told her that the specialist said Nina will never be able to again carry a full-term pregnancy, meaning she can't have babies. Later that night, Millie hears commotion, so she gets worried and she goes downstairs, and she hears Nina screaming at Andrew, saying things like, this is all my fault. If you just married someone younger, you wouldn't be in this situation. I'm the reason you can't have babies. If you were just with someone more beautiful and younger, you could have the life that you want, blah, blah, blah. Because Nina is, they don't say how much older, but she is a little bit older than him. And then she hears a loud crash, and then Nina opens the door, and they're just like having a stare down because Millie isn't even supposed to be out. but she sees like blood on her hand, and Millie is convinced Nina killed Andrew. But then Andrew like turns on the shower and she hears this, so she's like, okay, and she goes back upstairs. The next day, Andrew tells her to buy tickets for him and Nina for the Broadway show Showdown, I think it was called, because she's been talking about it nonstop and he just really wants to cheer her up after what happened. So she goes and she finds a good day for Nina. She asks her and Nina says next Sunday. And then next Sunday comes and Nina is pissed because she won't be home. She has to drive Cecilia to camp, and because it's so far away, she's gonna spend the night in a hotel and then come back the next day. So she's really mad that she can't go, and Andrew's like, well, first she's like, you're paying for everything out of pocket, and the tickets alone, I think they said, were like $200. So Millie is freaking out because she can't afford to lose her paycheck like that. But Andrew's like, don't worry, I'll check to see if I can get it refunded. And then later on, he was like, I got it refunded. And then Nina leaves to go take Cecilia to camp, and Andrew tells Millie, oh, I didn't actually get it refunded, I just didn't want her to be mean to you. And then he tells her she can go, but she's like, oh, I don't have anyone to go with. So he's like, well, why don't I take you? She agrees. And by the way, at this point, I haven't really mentioned it, but at this point, Millie is in love with Andrew. Like, she is head over heels. She is thinking to herself, like, God, if only he left her, he could marry me and I could give him all the babies he wants. Which sounds gross to me. I don't know. Like, don't refer to yourself as like a breeding tool. I don't know. Even if you want kids, like, don't do that. That's icky. And then also earlier in the book, Nina had 2 plastic bags of clothes that she wanted to donate to because she no longer fits into them. They were like a size 6-ish, and apparently she's like a size 12 now or something. I don't really remember. I don't really think it was honestly that relevant to know the sizes, but I'm not going to go into that. The point is, Nina looked at Millie. She was like, are you like this, what size are you? And she told her, and then she's like, oh, that's the size of the dresses, you take them. So Millie did. She wore like a really nice white dress because Nina wears basically exclusively white because it's Andrew's favorite color. So they drive out to the Broadway show, and then once the show is done, Andrew takes her to this really fancy, expensive French restaurant to eat, and they get really drunk, too drunk to drive. So they're like, well, let's just go stay in the hotel we booked. I'll get a separate room. That's what Andrew says. He's like, you can have the room, I'll get a separate one for myself. It's okay. They don't get a separate room. And long story short, they do exactly what you think they did. So days pass, they haven't done anything again, but it's very clear that both sides want to. Again, Millie, madly in love, Andrew struggling with Nina. But what had happened was, one night at dinner, Nina said in front of Andrew that Millie is a convict. So she knew this whole time. And Millie was embarrassed, but she kind of talked to Andrew and it didn't bother him that much. And they made out for a little bit in the garage, I think. I don't remember exactly where they were. But then she comes back in and Nina's just chilling in the dark on the couch in the living room. And Millie shrieks. She's so frightened. And she's like, what are you doing? And Nina was like, why did you steal my clothes? And she's like, I didn't, you gave them to me. And Nina's like, I did not. Why would I give you my clothes? Why would I give you thousands of dollars worth of dresses? Andrew hears Nina screaming, so he comes in, he's like, what is going on? And Nina's like, she stole my stuff. And Millie was like, I did not steal them. She gave it to me. And then Nina's like, she's a convict. She clearly stole them. She was in prison, which, like, we don't know what she was in prison for yet. It might not have been theft. Stop assuming, Nina. I don't know why I'm defending Millie. I'm not that big of a fan of her, but basically, Andrew defends Millie. He's like, you told me you wanted to donate them because they don't fit you anymore. I saw you pack them. Like, she didn't steal them. And then he asks Millie to go upstairs and give them some privacy, but she ends up eavesdropping. So we hear him tell Nina he wants a divorce. And he's like, I do have feelings for Millie, but that's not what this is about. It's about the fact that I don't love you anymore and this isn't working. I want a divorce. And he's like, move out right now. So Nina goes, packs her bags, moves out. The next day, he tells Millie to like take the day off. He doesn't want her like cooking and cleaning for her since she's not really gonna be a maid anymore. And Millie's just like, I'm his girlfriend. Girly, he's not even divorced yet. Calm down. But she sits at home, she like takes out a couple books out of the bookshelf, doesn't really interest her, she puts them on the coffee table. She's like, screw it, I'm just gonna go grocery shopping. There's not even groceries. So she goes, grocery shops, and then in the grocery shop she runs into someone, and the person's like, I cannot believe that you're comfortable with her tracking your location. So she finds out that Nina's has a tracking app on her phone, so she goes in and deletes it. And then she goes home, she makes dinner, and then she like gets freaked out, so she starts moving her stuff out of the attic. And Andrew comes home and he's like, what are you doing? She's like, I was thinking I could live in the guest room. And he's like, yeah, sure. So they like go up and they get freaky and they get busy, and after that whole spiel they fall asleep. And then she wakes up at 3 a.m. because she didn't go to the bathroom before bed, so she needs to go now. And she finds that the attic door is locked, which I didn't mention this, but when she moved in, she found out that the attic door only locks from the outside. It can't be locked or unlocked from the inside. So she has no way of getting out. And then we do a POV switch. Yeah, it just leaves you hanging like that. So we go into part 2, we do a POV switch, and we're actually in the point of view of Nina. And basically, I'm gonna summarize like 50 plus pages, but this entire plot point is her explaining that this was all a ploy for her to get away with Andrew because he is actually evil and crazy. Yeah, that came out of nowhere. But basically, they met. She was kind of like the victim of her boss being mean to her. He saw that, they went to dinner, he liked her, they started dating, he proposed, they got married, and then after they got married, he started locking her in the attic as a punishment. So that's why there's a cot and like a blue bucket in the attic for her to pee. And there's a little fridge with 3 tiny little bottles. And that was all shown at the beginning, like that's what Millie walked into. So that was said, that's not new. I just didn't mention it. But yeah, the first time he locked her in the attic because she went too long without dyeing her hair and her roots started showing, because he likes blonde, so she started dyeing her hair blonde, which ladies and gents and non-binary pals, don't dye your hair for your partner, or you'll get locked in an attic. Unless you don't have an attic, then I guess you're safe. But he locked her in the attic, and her punishment was she had to rip out 100 hairs of her head with the root to give to him. And he locked her in there for maybe like 2 days, and she only had 3, like this small compared to my face. Bottles of water, so not a lot at all. And then by the time she got out, she was super weak, hadn't eaten or drank anything in days. And he gave her water and a bagel, but then she was feeling super ill and she knocked out. Next day she woke up, heard water running, saw Cecilia as like a 3-year-old unconscious, and the water was like the bathtub was running and she was about to drown. And then the police arrived and she's like, oh thank God, yeah, Andrew did this. But Andrew like texted her a bunch of times and basically framed it, making her look like she had a mental breakdown and tried to kill herself and her baby because he drugged her and her baby and put the baby in the bathtub. She goes to an institution for I think about 8 months, and they're telling her that she's having delusions and she had like a psychotic break, and that delusions can feel very real but it didn't actually happen. And essentially just she gets gaslit the shit out of her, takes pills that she actually doesn't need. And then about a year after that happens, he locks her in again, and she's like, oh my God, it did happen. And he was like, remember, I nearly killed your kid. And he also like threatened her, saying he had a letter sent to the police so that if he were to die, she would be blamed and blah, blah, blah. So he had her under lock and key. And remember, he's super rich. His family was very influential. He's like one of those rich white guys that could get away with murder because he's friends with everyone who's important. So basically throughout the years, he keeps like locking her in the attic, torturing her. They don't go into too much detail, but it is said that she once had to like mace herself or something because he thought she put too much air freshener in the room. So he was like actually insane. Basically, that is what happened. And we also find out that that's why the peanut butter is in the house, because Cecilia is actually allergic, and he would sometimes just put peanut butter into her food to remind Nina what he's capable of. So he's like legitimately a monster. We then, after finding out all of this, obviously feeling really bad for Nina and completely taking back everything that we said. Oh, we also find out that she isn't actually crazy. She was just acting very vindictive and mean and rude to Millie to make her look like the victim, to get Andrew to fall in love with her. So that's what was happening. She wasn't actually that mean. In fact, in some of the parts, like, she was like, I feel so bad for doing this, but I have to, kind of situation, which we'll get to a bit more later. But then we switch back to Millie and find out that Andrew's doing the same thing to her now. Why? Because she left 3 books on the coffee table instead of putting them back into the bookshelf. Which, like, if someone took books out of my bookshelf and didn't put them back, would I be annoyed? Yes. If it was my partner, I would very politely be like, hey, could you maybe put them back next time? If you don't remember, that's fine, then just like let me know. I wouldn't lock them in an attic or a basement if I don't have an attic. I've never had either, to be honest, but I wouldn't lock them in a room with no food and this much water for 2 days and have them put 3 of the absolute heaviest books that you could think of on your stomach for 3 hours to the point where they're bruised. Yeah, that's what he did, and he made her do it twice because the first time she got up a minute early. But basically, yeah, that's what happens, and Millie is now dealing with the consequences of leaving 3 books on his coffee table, God forbid, and she's trying to problem solve. Then we switch back to Nina and find out that she specifically hired Millie because of her background. We find out she did this because she wanted to get out the relationship, so she wanted Andrew to fall in love with Millie. So we basically find out that even though she didn't know it at the time, she hired Millie to kill Andrew. We also do find out in this section that she has tried to escape before. Her gardener Enzo actually does speak English, and he tried to get her money and a fake ID and like to leave, but Andrew just found all of that. So she's been trying to escape and she's being punished for it, but there is just actually no way out for her except making Andrew fall in love with someone else, which is why she did to Millie what she did. But then we switch back to Millie's point of view. There's a lot of switching POVs in the second half of the book. So after her torture, after she has in total had these very, very heavy books on her stomach for over 6 hours, and she is completely bruised up, Andrew comes up, talks to her, and she's trying to negotiate. She's like, please let me out. So he comes in and sits with her, and then she pepper sprays him because Nina left her pepper spray in the pee bucket. So she pepper sprays him, he like drops his phone, she grabs his phone, she runs out, and luckily she has a key to the outside because she specifically asked Nina if she could have a key because she didn't feel comfortable not having one, even though the door doesn't unlock from the inside. And she locks him in there. And she basically does a 180. He had this thing where he's like, I'll let you out, but not yet. And then she kept saying that to him, which I thought was kind of funny. But yes, she basically locks him, and then we switch POVs again. So we're back to Nina. And this is where we finally find out what Nina's history is, why she went to jail. So we learned that Millie went to jail for 10 years for murder. Technically, it was manslaughter, but either way, it was very violent. There was this dude who was trying to R-word her friend, so she bashed his skull in with like a thing. Like she took a thing and just bashed his skull in. But she, like, later on, she did kind of mention that she kind of liked it. So Millie is not a victim. Like, good on her for saving her friend, but she's a little violent. And we switch in between, back and forth between the two, and we do find out like what Millie does to Andrew, or what Millie makes Andrew do to himself. But yeah, a few days pass, and Enzo finally convinces Nina to go back to the house and help Millie because he knows what Andrew's been doing to her, to Nina, and then obviously Millie too. And he marked like the tire in her car, and Andrew's car has been traveling, but Millie's hasn't. And he's really concerned, so he finally tells her, like, her car hasn't moved in 3 days, someone is in the attic, I've seen them, and I am worried for her. Like, you know what you went through, you can't let someone else go through this. So Nina finally agrees because it's been 3 days and he hasn't seen Millie. So she goes to the house, it's very eerily quiet, she has pepper spray, and then she goes up to the attic and she's like, okay Millie, I'm here, I'm gonna help you, I'm so sorry. Unlocks the door and throws up when she finds a mutilated body. Yeah, Andrew's dead. So Nina didn't have the pepper spray, I'm sorry. Millie then comes and she has the pepper spray and she's like holding it up to her and she's like, what are you doing? And everything. And she's like, go check if he's dead. And he is dead. And then that's when Millie kind of freaks out because she realizes she's gonna go back to jail and there's no way they'll let her out, yada yada yada. So despite everything, Nina's like, okay, leave. I'm gonna tell them you had the week off. I'll call the police. And she's like, I can't, like, you did this for me. I can't let you go back to jail. So Millie, like, doesn't blink twice. She leaves. And Nina calls the police. She tells them that she found her husband's body in the attic. And she explains that she thought he was on a business trip. She didn't realize he was home. And he must have gotten locked in there and she didn't know or hear him. And then a detective comes and he's like, so do you really want me to believe that while you were home, your husband was locked in an attic that you didn't know about because you thought he was on a business trip? And during that time, he just went crazy and pulled out his own teeth? And she's like, yeah, I want you to believe that. But then the officer was like, you know, my daughter dated him. And Nina's like, what? Because she heard of his ex. So he's like, yeah, my daughter is actually, I think her name was Kathleen. Don't quote me on that though, but we'll go with Kathleen for this. So he's like, yeah, Kathleen, he was engaged to her. And Nina's like, that's the girl he like showed me pictures of that I never got into contact with because she was trying to contact her to see if he did that to her too. So the detective is like, yeah, no, after they broke up, she was never the same. She moved to the other side of the country, she changed her name, and she hasn't dated a man since. He's like, and I always thought it was weird. That's why I transferred here to like try and figure stuff out. But you know, like his dad was always just so close with the police that it was really hard to find anything. And Nina was like, yeah. And then the detective is basically like, you know what? I do think it was completely an accident that Andrew locked himself in the attic and then pulled out his own teeth and died. And the bruises on his stomach and nether region is just unexplainable, really. So long story short, the detective thinks Andrew did something bad to his daughter and like basically is covering for her because he kind of picked up like, you did what you had to and I am not gonna have you go to jail for that. So she gets off like scot-free, and no one but Nina and Millie, I don't even think Enzo knows what happened to him. And the 4 pulled out teeth and the bruises, which by the way, she made him put the books on his, just never explained. And then about a week later, there's the funeral and Nina's just like playing the widow wife, and she's just like, as soon as this is over I can leave. She's moving to the West Coast. She doesn't want to know anything else. She's so excited to get out. She just has to play sad. And his parents come to the funeral, so his dad says something and then he leaves crying and his mom just stands there. She was like, it's so disappointing. I always told him his dental health is so important. And Nina's like, what? And she's like, that dental hygiene is very important and he should never skip a brush. And Nina's like, and she's like, yeah, I thought he learned his lesson when I pulled out one of his teeth as a toddler, but I guess he didn't. It's the mom's fault. Which, like, I really like that ending, side note, because it makes his actions make so much more sense. It doesn't make it okay, but like, of course you choose to lock your wives in attics and torture them as punishments because that's what your mom did to you. That's what you think is normal and okay. That's kind of insane. That was a good twist. I really appreciated that. Nina is obviously disgusted and she's like, okay, I'm gonna go. And she goes, Enzo took Cecilia to McDonald's or something and away from the funeral because she was bored, and Cecilia doesn't really understand what happened. Nothing ever happened to her, but she does know, like Cecilia did know that if she did something bad, her mom disappears for a couple of days. So she didn't like Andrew, even though he wasn't her birth dad, by the way. She had Cecilia before she even met Andrew, but he was the only father figure she'd ever known, so she was kind of just happy that he was gone, even though she didn't know why. But yeah, Nina moved to California, doesn't want anything to do with the Winchesters ever again. I don't know if she changed her name or not. I don't think that was mentioned. And then basically the book ends with Millie doing an interview for another housekeeping position a little while later. And basically the interviewer lady tells her, oh, Nina highly recommended you. And she like moved her shirt so you could see like a bruise of a hand mark right here. And Millie was like, oh, that's why she recommended me. And basically the book kind of ends with the woman being like, so can you help me? And Millie is like, yeah, I can. And it's basically implied that she's just gonna keep helping abused housewives get rid of their husbands in one way or another. And yeah, that was the end of the book for now. I'm obviously reading book 2 right now, so I'll make that video once it's ready. In terms of when it should come out, like these should come out back to back, like Friday. It shouldn't be a long wait, but it is fun, and I'm not going to give away what happens in book 2 in this one, but it was a very fun read. It was a wild ride. The twists I did not see coming, which like I should have. And yeah, book 2 is very similar. I want to say, like, if you read the premise, she's still a housekeeper and it's still like a similar story. But yeah, this is a really good book. I did enjoy it quite a lot, and it was a very fun read. I personally enjoyed Never Lie better than I enjoy this one, but that doesn't matter too much because it was still a good book. I hope that I did the plot justice. Definitely let me know if you've read it, what you thought of my little summary. Did I miss any important details? I wrote my script basically the day after I finished the book, and I wrote it kind of from memory, whereas with book 2 I'm trying to kind of write as I go and then just edit afterwards. But this was really fun. It took forever. I think if you include editing this video, this would probably be like a full day's worth of work, but it was really fun. I enjoyed it. I think between reading vlogs and this, like, I might throw in a couple more of these, especially for popular books that most people have read, so that these can be like fully spoilers. But yeah, definitely let me know what you thought of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like me or my videos, I would really appreciate a like, comment, and subscribe if you feel like it. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you so much. Bye.